What is a clearance inspection? This is a very important video so that you make sure that your mold remediation was done properly, okay? No wasted money, no stress of did we get it all done and handled effectively. A clearance inspection, also known as a PRV, Post-Remediation Verification, should be done by your third-party IEP or indoor environmental professional. This third-party inspector should have done your initial inspection, then your remediation should be done, and then they should come back, or another third party, but ideally the same one, to do your clearance assessment, which we'll talk about now. I've done hundreds and hundreds of these, and the key is that what I found on my inspection and then wrote in my protocol was then done properly by the remediation company according to what I wrote, and on my final clearance, we get to put a bow on it and call it done if it fits the clearance criteria. So as you've seen in my mold timeline, very, very important visual to understand the steps in the process to complete your mold process, to get in the maintain and move on final stage of fortifying, optimizing, and maintaining your environment. We got to get through the mold timeline. So summed up, it's these 3 steps. There's just different roles that the inspector needs to have, different things that has to happen in the remediation before we rebuild and then move on. But these 3 steps is ideally what you want. As I say, usually this is the diagnostic doctor, this is the surgeon for your home, and the diagnostic doctor comes back to make sure the surgery was done properly on the home. So every home is different, okay? But these are the principles you want to be putting in place every time. What's the clearance criteria? The inspector should have a clearance criteria in their report saying, this job will clear, remediation guidelines when this, and this is done and in place, okay? So we actually have some measurements to be done. Everything is according to the IICRC S520 protocols. These are my certifications here, and that's what I write my protocols off of, and every good inspector should, and every remediator should be following those as well. So that is the governing body for a proper mold remediation. So was my protocol followed? Was the containment barriers in the right place? Were the containment barriers good? Were things taken down during the process? That wouldn't help. Was the protocol followed according to what I said with materials that need to be removed, or did they stop short? Did they clean these materials well enough, or did they just spray something on them? That is what we're looking for on the visual assessment. So bright flashlight shows me most of what I need to know in a clearance assessment, and knowing what I wrote initially and what it should look like. Photos should be taken of the final product, and moisture readings should be taken. Make sure everything's dry. We're not going to build over wet materials, of course. Thermal imaging I will just thoroughly inspect. There's been times where someone did a flood cut in the wall, but there was still mold up higher on the backside. But in my protocol, I said, continue removing following the path of the contamination. So if we cut from here down, but there's still mold on the backside of this drywall, doesn't pass. That should have been found and notified of the homeowner and even myself that there was still mold found. We need to do a little bit more removal, but a good remediator is kind of looking and investigating as they go, of course. So photos should be taken, and the area should be dust free. Okay, so in the IICRC S520 protocols, that is one of their clearance criteria. If I go into a contained environment where all the remediation was done, but there's still a lot of dust residual left behind, they didn't HEPA vacuum and wipe down well enough and didn't do the proper cleaning. So what's in that dust? A little bit of everything probably. Dust free is a really important clearance criteria. Some people will do a wet or a white glove test on that. But the testing then follows the visual, right? So if we did an air test in a room and it was 10,000 spores, for instance, we want to have it at only a couple hundred spores max to really make sure that it passes the testing criteria. Do not do an ERMI as your post-remediation verification testing. That's just, I'm not getting into that on this one, but an ERMI or Petri dishes is not how you clear a job. You clear a job with visual assessment, following the steps, with knowing how it was done. Was negative air pressure established? Were they cleaning as they were going? Does everything else check out? And then are air and potentially surface samples taken? Those are going to be the ones that can actually deem that clear. Again, every job's a little different, but these are the principles that apply to all. And then finally, the worst is when I go into a job and they already painted a white encapsulant paint over the materials, and that definitely should not happen. If we're going to encapsulate, which I rarely ever recommend, we don't really need to if the job's been done well, but if we choose to, or the homeowners and the situation is chosen to use an encapsulant, it should never be encapsulated until right before we're going to rebuild that removed material, because the encapsulation covers stuff, and that way I'm kind of blind to seeing how well the materials were actually cleaned. So that's a very, very important one, is not having some encapsulant paint done too early in the process. Hope this helps. Every clearance criteria is going to be a little bit customized, like I said, but this is what I commit to on my inspections. And when I see remediations done, these are some of the things I'm looking for. So before closing up the job and confidently, rebuilding and putting it all back together, we got to make sure these steps are in place.